Making America Great should be more than just a marketing slogan.
So Greg, a topic under immense focus currently is America's attitude towards climate change. Now this is in light of Donald Trump pulling out of the recent Paris Agreement. So let's have a look, starting a little bit backwards. 2016, what was America's attitude towards renewable energy?
Well, thanks, Jessica. I think, ultimately this is a question in two parts. First, it's about the policy, Trump pulling out of the Paris Agreement. Second, it's about the business environment for renewable energy and related technologies in the U.S. To unpack this, I'd say we'd have to start by looking at the business environment. And as of the end of March this year, the U.S. government estimated that there's about 84 gigawatts of installed wind energy. That's about 84 billion watts. And then roughly about 24 gigawatts of installed solar capacity. Even though this is about 10% of the total demand in the U.S., growth in green energy sources has far outpaced other sources, including natural gas. Now, if we look at the private markets, roughly $50 billion has flowed into green energy since 2012. And if you add the public markets on top of that, the total is well over $100 billion. This might make you think that the U.S. is a leader in the energy revolution. And while this would be true to a certain extent, obviously pulling out of Paris, shows that there's a vocal and well-funded opposition to these sorts of agreements, or even the idea that climate change is real. In fact, in despite of the fact that an overwhelming majority of Americans actually favor the concept of the Paris Agreement. Now, for some, their opposition is a matter of sovereignty, and I think we've seen this in other countries, maybe not to the same extent as in the U.S. While for others, it's they're just opposed to the idea of climate change and alternative energy, largely due to concerns about how the shift or an energy revolution would impact jobs in the economy. However, solar and wind energy jobs today currently account for about 5.5 times the number of coal-related jobs. And remember, Trump ran on support for the coal miners and so on. And even if you factor in all of the fossil fuel energy jobs in the U.S., solar and wind alone are about 2.5 times, or employ 2.5 times the number of people that all fossil fuels do. So given that the current administration really has no plan beyond just drill more, mine more, and that investors are interested in these sectors, I would say commitment to clean energy, commitment to some sort of change in terms of our energy economy really has gained a momentum onto itself, and it would probably take significant legislation at this point to undo it, even with Trump saying he's out of Paris.
And it seems like from 2012 until now, there has been quite a lot of advancements in this area. But it seems like 2017, there has been some uncertainty. So what is the main uncertainty at present?
Okay, well, this is a tough question to answer, to tell you the truth. I think we have to start by looking at globally and understand that we've entered a period of extreme volatility. Looking at Asia, there's a mounting debt crisis, geopolitical concerns in Korea and the South China Sea. In Europe, where you are, the foundations of NATO and the European Union, the bedrocks of peace and stability in Europe have really been called into question. Meanwhile, the situation in Russia and the Middle East is far from secure, and this fluidity has already had a massive impact on global markets. Drawing it back to the U.S., we're in the midst of one of the longest periods of economic expansion since World War II. And while that would sound like a good thing, this morning's sell-off has shown that there's some uncertainty that's creeping into the equation. The warning signs are there. U6, which is a measure of total employment, is so low that it points to an inevitable contraction of some sort. While the Federal Reserve is in the process of normalizing interest rates, and this will have a significant impact on global markets as the cost of capital is expected to increase. Then we get to Trump, the election, the Russia story, and other intrigues, including the specter of potential trade wars with Canada, China, and Mexico. Now, the president ran on the promise of being a successful businessman who knew the game and could disrupt Washington. Well, his business acumen is very much an open question, but there's no doubt that his arrival has disrupted the federal government. This can be seen with the sheer volume of appointments that have been left unfilled, and which we believe will never be filled, and even the radical viewpoints of some of his cabinet members. In fact, Trump's government sees it as their mission to dismantle government. Somewhat ironic in that his presidency has been in some ways more imperial than his predecessors, which is a feat in and of itself. From a risk standpoint, this has thrown many of the existing models out the window. Internally, the election of Trump forced us to recalibrate our own risk index, which is part of our AI-enabled growth opportunity index. Not so much because we did not see the potential for a Trump victory, but rather because his administration is less likely to follow established norms. This has resulted in a more cautious view on the long-term growth potential in the US and abroad, at least in the macro sense. And I think this is why you're seeing this uncertainty, at home and abroad.
And you do make a really interesting point there, because Trump's vowed to make America great again. Is there anything positive that can be for the renewable energy sector that can be taken away from a Trump presidency?
If we're looking at the government alone, my answer would have to be not really. On the plus side, many of the production tax credits that are in place today for wind, solar, and even closed-loop biomass will remain in place until 2019. But the legislation that supports these already has these credits being phased out beginning as early as this year. Ultimately, Mr. Trump and his advisors don't really see the need for developing the energy technology of the future, and this is something which will cost the U.S. dearly. Even the focus on Pittsburgh, not Paris, is misguided, and it's doing his supporters an injustice. The loss of coal jobs is not due to climate agreements. It's due to emerging technologies, including automation and inexpensive natural gas. What does this mean? Well, wind and solar are just getting started. Imagine the disruption when storage technologies mature and alternative energies become, power baseline demand. As such, policymakers need to rethink their role in enabling America's leadership in this important sector while positioning the American worker for success. This means retooling industries and workers to meet the demands of tomorrow through things like job training, internships, apprenticeships, and possibly some form of safety net. Making America great should be more than just a marketing slogan. However, our reality television producer, come president, doesn't seem to understand this.
Great. Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining us on the line all the way from New York City.
You're welcome. You have a great day.
Well, that's all from us here in the Geneva studios, but we want to hear how you found this interview, so drop a comment in the comment box below.